football and the situation they're doing. Again, we have Mike Schaefer in studio with for the 7 o'clock hour. You can call or text 464-5685 with any questions. It was a simple question off the bat. I want to ask you this exact question, but Schaefer, what is your trust level in Trev Alberts to get this hire right for Nebraska?
I don't know. I mean, I think I feel better about him than I did Sean Eichhorst in the most comparable situation. I think in ways I feel better about him than I did Tom Osborne in 2007, who had never been an athletic director.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I feel fine about it. Part of it is I think the wealth of candidates that they have to pick from, and where Nebraska's at as a football program has made it relatively easy for me to sort of look at the wealth of candidates and be like, they should at least end up with someone that is going to have an opportunity to do well here. Are they going to be great? I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, despite 24/7 Sports aggressive marketing towards crystal balls. But I think that I think it's fine. I mean, he made a relatively splashy hire for UNO's hockey, several years back that kind of put them on a trajectory to make a jump as a program.
Dean Blaze.
I don't think that he is incapable of making an important hire. And it gives me a little extra feeling of good that he is a former, like he's been in this football world for so long. Like, I mean, he's a former analyst, former player, former NFL player. I mean, he has connections throughout the landscape. Like, I feel better about that than, certainly Sean Eichhorst and his background going into it. And like I said, Nebraska's coaching searches have all sort of been weird. Right. This, in a strange way, a guy getting fired at the beginning of September somehow represents the most normal coaching search of the last.
I don't know. We'll see how that turns out.
The last few, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like I said, it's a bizarre statement to say out loud, but I mean, it's kind of a,
Let me ask you this though, because I'm curious in terms of when the hire happened. So when Eichhorst hired Mike Riley, that was out of nowhere. Nobody had that in the radar. I
don't think anybody.
Oh, come on. Nobody in the world was saying Mike Riley to Nebraska. Now, Scott Frost, everyone said that.
I think his name had appeared as like a deep candidate, but it wasn't like it was tracked that this was going to happen.
The deepest candidate. I didn't see his name at all. So I'm curious.
Barry Alvarez. He was a candidate in Barry Alvarez's mind.
Yeah. You've got 2 months now. And all these names are going to appear. We've already heard tons of names. Is there any way when the hire is made, it could be a surprise that we have not even talked about? When you have 2 months to talk about it?
I mean, I don't think so, because I think if you take Trev at his word, they're going to hire someone who's a sitting coach or has been a coach very recently. So I think that allows you to eliminate pretty much most coordinators, not all of them, but a large chunk of coordinators, especially if they've never been a head coach before. I would be pretty surprised if it's someone that has to make a jump from, like, say, the Sun Belt or the MAC or something like that. So I think it's more likely either a Power 5 head coach, Bill O'Brien is about the only coordinator I think sort of makes sense at this point. And that could change. And then even from the lower conference level, I mean, you're sort of looking at like Luke Fickell would be sort of the name there. But for the most part, I think that it's fairly dialed in as to who the top of the list is going to look like at this point in time, with some potential for a guy like Matt Rule to maybe shake things up if he is let go by the crumbling
Panthers.
Carolina Panthers. I think Matt Rule makes a lot of sense, and I think he would be very interested in the job. So there's going to be some people that pop up, but I think for the most part, like, the names that you're sort of hearing early as the contenders for the job are going to be one of those three. Seems, I mean, those seem like 90% of the likelihood of who Nebraska's next coach would be coming from one of Bill O'Brien, Matt Campbell, Lance Leipold.
Wow. In that sense,
at least
there won't be any drama, because we will have played out the conversation for 2 months.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and then when it happens, I don't.
Well, what do we play out now? we already did this.
And again, I could be entirely wrong, and maybe someone pops up.
Someone
off the
pops
radar.
up. Yeah.
It would be sort of hard for me to figure out who that is right now. I mean, because
Kalen DeBoer could pop up.
Sure, but those even like the sort of, I guess, if you will, fringe candidates are still names that have been mentioned. It's not like, there's nobody talking about Kalen DeBoer.
Right. Or we're going to talk about everybody in 2 months.
Dave Doran, or whatever.
NC State,
yeah.
Yesterday,
that's today's punching bag on 24/7 Sports, by the way.
But punching
Dave
bag.
Doran.
That's how pinata, I think, is how I phrased it, because after starting with Matt Campbell, then going to Lance Leipold, yesterday was Bill O'Brien. I don't know how people have any swings left in them. I would think that
getting tired.
The rotation of the hips and the oblique, I'd be worried, folks. Like if you're hauling off swinging on all these candidates, take your time.
Who is the candidate? Like Jake asked this question a lot, and it's a good one. Who is the candidate that comes close to unifying the fan base? Because nobody will.
There's one.
Yeah, okay, but it's impossible to unify. But what's the closest to it?
So
is it Dave Aranda?
I
guess. If you give him as a possibility,
but I don't even think he's a possibility, despite the weird sort of last 48 hours of random internet people claiming that this is going to be a thing.
I didn't even see that.
It's been all over Twitter, which is
how did I not see that?
Because you're hanging out in the right places. That's right.
Because you're not living your life as poorly as Jake and I. That's the answer.
So there's no, wait a second. Let's address it. There's a Twitter conversation.
There's
about
a
Aranda.
Twitter conversation. There's a Baylor podcast. There's and I think that one's mostly in jest. But
it was in jest. That one was definitely. I listened to it. Is in jest.
So
good on you.
It's just there's going to be these things that kind of pop up. I don't think Dave Aranda wants the Nebraska job. The early indications of what we've kind of tried to suss out so far not a lot of connection there. So besides the fact that obviously he's had success in the Big Ten and everything, I mean, I would guess Dave Aranda is holding out for something bigger or is content to stay at Baylor. So it's possible, but
do you think there could be a conversation with Kyle Whittingham, Utah? Would he listen?
Could be.
That might unify the fan base somewhat, not completely, but getting there.
Sure. I think the initial sort of detractors would be his age.
62.
Yep.
Well, and that's not even really that old. Lance Leipold's 58.
Mm-hmm.
The other candidates are kind of all ranging in age.
Patterson's only 62, by the way. I've said on our show he's 66.
Gary Patterson's
62.
So I was a little bit higher on that name until I dug into sort of how it finished at TCU and some conversation with people that were around there.
Mm-hmm.
And look, if he's completely changed how it ended, but you want to talk about someone where the people there would tell you that he checked out pretty completely in the last 18 months of his tenure.
Yeah. I don't think Gary Patterson should come up in conversation. I don't.
And that in itself would just negate Trev Albert's interest.
Right.
I mean, he wants someone who just grinds things out.
He does.
That's not Gary Patterson.
That is something we haven't identified on this show about the qualities he's looking for. He said that. In fact, we should revisit that tape at some point. His press conference on the Sunday that they announced Scott's fired officially. He did say that he wants a grinder. He doesn't want somebody with a lot of hobbies. I mean, that has a lot of off-field activity. Eliminate Lane Kiffin. I mean, seriously. That's not the type of coach he's looking for.
Well, in addition, and I think the other thing is he's looking for a personality fit between him and the coach too. I mean, and that in itself would make, and I think Lane Kiffin would have a lot of support from people. I mean, I certainly would be excited to see Lane Kiffin at Nebraska, but at the same time, it's hard for me to square up Trev Alberts as Lane Kiffin's AD. It's also hard for me to square up all the stories about Scott Frost and then Lane Kiffin is the coach that, follows him.
Right.
Because those stories exist too.
He wants a grinder. A lot of those out there.
Joel Klatt the other day on Fox Sports, I think he was on the Herd with Colin Cowherd, threw out the name for Nebraska, Jonathan Smith at Oregon State. Nebraska's gone down the Oregon State road before with an older coach, of course, than Mike Riley. Smith's done a very nice job out there, to be fair. He has done a good job. Do you think that could be a guy in the conversation?
It could be. I just don't like if you're in a sort of a heads up of would you rather have Dave Doran or Jonathan Smith? Like, which direction are you going to go? Seriously.
I don't know.
So
I don't know.
That sort of tells me all I need to, if you don't have an immediate answer for either of those two, one, it tells me neither is particularly exciting for you.
Correct.
And both sort of exist in the periphery of, I guess it could be that guy.
Yeah, that's exactly how it is. You're not excited, but you're
Like
not like, it's
I
not gonna
do
work
think it's
out.
telling. Like if you just play this game with people where you give them two names and they can't give you an answer right away, you eliminate both of the names.
Some of it is I just don't know enough about Jonathan Smith. I didn't know we were going to. I haven't done any kind of dive on Jonathan Smith.
Well, and if you're looking at Jonathan Smith, why wouldn't you look at the guy at Washington State who replaced? I can't even think of his name now. With the
don't worry
whole
about it.
COVID thing.
No,
he's the defensive coordinator that replaced Nick Rolovich.
Rolovich.
Oh yeah, he's right. Yeah.
And I can't think of.
Don't worry about it.
The coach's name.
But there's a lot of names that I simply would have to look into.
Jonathan Smith, if you want.
Yeah,
this is not going to go over well with fans who.
I don't think it's a real thing.
I know, but his record so far at Oregon State is 19-28. He's gone 2-10, 5-7, 2-5 in COVID, 7-6 last year, and he's 3-0 this year.
Progress.
I don't. Yeah. That doesn't get the fan base. But as to Schaefer's question, if you have Dave Doran versus Jonathan Smith, does anybody pop up as an obvious yes?
Well, Doran's record would be better than that.
Yeah, that doesn't.
He's got 7 winning seasons and
he
9
does
years.
not get the fan base going. Dave Doran.
I think Dave Doran would be like the C sort of on the grade sheet higher, and I think he would do well here.
Now, while we're talking about it,
what is well is a relative.
Does it need to get the fan base going?
No, I don't.
Right.
I don't think so at all. Like this is a weird place to be,
Mm-hmm.
but coming off of the collective, everyone's excited. This is a grand slam. Everything's going to go great.
Mm-hmm.
Upward trajectory. Quite frankly, if Trev Alberts makes a hire that he's happy with, and that person comes here and they're comfortable in Lincoln, kind of all that matters.
Yeah, we don't,
because the off-season grading of these things sort of coaches don't get long runways as it is anyways.
Right.
So, if a guy comes here and it's immediately bad, in 2 years, you're doing this all over again.
Are people talking enough about Dave Clawson as a possibility?
No,
they aren't talking at all about Dave Clawson.
Are you surprised about that?
I mean, I've been leading the Dave Clawson fan club for 2 years, and not one
coach.
person has shown up to one of our meetings. It's me and Slider, and Slider offers no conversation.
So it's just you.
Yeah.
So Clawson,
a lot of cupcakes that no one's eating.
He's done amazing things. Well, Wake Forest. Look at their record in the last. Yeah, go ahead.
So he took over Wake Forest in 2014, and the first 2 years went 3-9 both years. Okay, a rebuild. Then he went 7-6, 8-5, 7-6, 8-5, 4-5 in COVID, 11-3 last year, and he's 3-0 this season.
Do you know what happened? I think in the second of those 3 and 9 years,
no,
it came out that their color commentator was selling information from practices to opposing ACC teams.
I remember.
You want to talk about a bizarre, toxic story that somehow got buried in the annals of no one talks about Wake Forest? Their color commentator was selling offensive plays to Louisville, to Virginia Tech, to several other teams that admitted that they didn't, but then it's questionable how they knew certain things when they were happening.
Surprised there's a market for that.
Yeah. It exists now. You know it.
You pay for that information? I wonder what do you pay for that information?
You'd have to ask Tommy, whatever the guy's name is. Former Wake Forest player, former coach on the staff, loved in Winston-Salem, and then it comes out that he's selling information about the team. So no, I love Dave Clawson. I think Dave Clawson would be a terrific fit here in Lincoln. I think that it would go really well. I also think he's just going to take one look at this job and pass, because he's got a dream situation at Wake Forest where they're paying him well. They just built new facilities. They have a top 25 team. Yep. He's installed that offense. I think he's very comfortable. And then he was at Tennessee as an offensive coordinator and didn't go well. I think he knows what that fishbowl is like, and I think he's more than content to just stay in the small pond.
So in that conversation we had about people would be excited about Dave Doran versus Jonathan Smith, what if I threw out there Dave Clawson versus Kalen DeBoer?
I would Dave Clawson every day of the week. And I think Caleb DeBoer, if he was still at Fresno State, I think that would be like a group of 5 name that would certainly be on this list. I have a tough time seeing him leave Washington after 1 year to come to Nebraska. But he has all sorts of Midwest ties. He's a South Dakota guy. He's recruiting this state as it is right now in Washington. I think he's a really good coach. He was obviously an offensive coordinator in the Big Ten. I think from a profile standpoint, makes a ton of sense. It's just hard for me to see him leaving Washington in 1 year, especially if they are successful right away.
We can do this in the next segment if we're up against the clock. Yeah. But I wrestle with this whole idea that it needs to be a hire that does unify or excite the fan base versus one that doesn't. there is a sellout streak to keep in mind. There's a
Do
part
you
of me
think
that
there's
says,
a coach that it's such a poor hire that people wouldn't show up? Because I don't know that exists.
it exists, but I get what you're saying. I told Jake earlier in the show, there's probably 40 that do the trick where you're
Yeah.
fine with. You'd have to go pretty.
Okay, yeah.
You
So
have to-
then, but in
yeah.
terms of realistic,
Yeah,
people
there's
we're talking
some-
about.
There's obviously some ones where you'd go, what? No. But not many.
Mhm.
Not within reason. But I don't know. I mean, the fan base is like Jake likes to say, on edge. I don't know.
Antsy.
They're
On
both
edge?
antsy and on edge, both of them.
Anxious,
Yeah, understandably so.
Perturbed.
perturbed, hurt,
Kind of pissed.
hurt,
Definitely hurt.
hurt,
Pissed.
pissed.
There's a lot of words.
Yeah.
A lot of descriptive words.